President Trump setting the stage for a potential second meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin if the summit on Friday goes well. He's also issuing an urgent new warning as they prepare to meet face to face. Listen to this.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
No specifics, but tough talk that comes just hours after speaking with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders this morning. Zelensky says he wants an immediate ceasefire before a peace deal can be negotiated. For Ukraine, peace cannot come soon enough. Russian forces have been launching a brutal offensive to claw territory away, and the UN says that July saw the highest number of civilians killed in Ukraine since the first months of Russia's full-scale invasion back in 2022. Let's take you now live to Kyiv with CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh. Nick, is there hope in Ukraine that this time, somehow, negotiations with Russia will be different?
I think there's a desperate need for peace, but I think there's little hope that Russian President Vladimir Putin genuinely wants that. That has been the undertone of everything that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been saying over the past days, and borne out by Russian advances, Ukrainian intelligence about Russia preparing for further military maneuvers. Look, we heard from Zelensky today reaffirming that if any deal is struck, they do not want to give up, or they will not give up parts of the Donetsk region that Russia is now fiercely fighting for, that it's not managed to occupy by force, even if it's in exchange for a ceasefire. They and their European allies want a ceasefire first. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who was the host of Zelensky today in Berlin, he was clear that the legal recognition of occupied parts of Ukraine as being Russian territory, as Russia's recently adjusted constitution suggests they are, that is not, quote, on the table. And Merz warned that there could be serious decisions made in Alaska in the meeting between Trump and Putin. Trump himself changing the tone of expectations ahead of that meeting, 24 hours of playing it down. Well, now he's suggesting, look, there could potentially very quickly afterwards be a trilateral summit between Trump, Putin and Zelensky if Trump likes what Putin says during that first meeting. I should point out that trilateral format is something that Putin has persistently rejected and indeed turned down directly the offer of a meeting like that from Zelensky, backed by Trump in May in Istanbul. Has much changed since then? Not really, except he's got a bilateral with Trump and his forces are doing way better on the battlefield. European leaders today desperately trying to shore up their position with President Trump. A European official I spoke to said that they felt after that call with Trump, the European leaders felt that the threat of sanctions, secondary sanctions against India or possibly China, the major customers of Russian oil, that threat is, quote, on. Remember, Indian sanctions kick in about 2 weeks from now unless Trump turns them off. That may be the threat hanging over this, but really, real anxiety as to what Trump and Putin concocts together in Alaska, their relationship so unpredictable, so impenetrable. Boris?
Nick Payton-Walsh, live for us in Kyiv. Thank you so much for the update. Let's discuss all of this further. We have CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier and former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst. He's now Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Thank you both for being with us. Kim, I want to start with you because you just noted that there was an announcement from Treasury, essentially a perfunctory step that would allow Vladimir Putin to enter U.S. territory, given all the sanctions that are in place. Beyond that, I also want to ask you about some new CNN reporting. President Trump appearing to say to European leaders that he would push for an unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine during the meeting, but also saying that Ukrainian territory is not his to negotiate. What do you make of all that?
Well, that's important because the worry inside Ukraine, I've been on a bunch of Ukrainian messaging channels, which is where I first saw that financial statement. The worry is that Trump will negotiate about Ukraine without Ukraine and cede territory in return for a ceasefire that no one thinks is going to last. Russia is on record as having broken multiple ceasefires since 2014 and again since 2022, so no one wants to Trump to put them into a position of agreeing to something that will give up Donetsk, the parts of Donetsk that Russia's asking for. It's about 3,500 square miles of territory that Russian troops haven't won on the battlefield. Now, that statement that I was talking about, they've temporarily lifted some of the sanctions. It looks like to me, according to this statement from Treasury, to allow the summit to take place. There are a lot of sanctions against Russian officials personally as well, so it looks like it's a temporary lifting specifically to allow the two men to meet in Alaska. It says at the last line, this doesn't lift sanctions against Russia.
Ambassador Herbst, I want to bring you into this conversation because one of the things that was pretty remarkable about today's meeting, or I should say press conference that the president held, was that this first meeting is expected to take place on Friday. But if it goes well, in his estimation, that the quote was, there is the potential for a quick second meeting that would be trilateral, which would include both Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. What was your thought on that?
Well, it's clear that President Trump and his team have begun to readjust after the substantial departure in their policy last Friday, when they went from major pressure on Russia across the board to Trump waiving the application of the sanctions following Putin failing to meet the August 8 deadline to stop shooting and opting for a summit instead, with painting rather road what that summit could produce. There's a realistic readjustment, lowering of expectations, and even Trump pointing out correctly that, maybe you can't trust Putin, and if he's not going to suggest he's willing to make peace, we have to put pressure on him again.
Ambassador, I wonder what you make of Trump, on one hand, telling European leaders that Ukrainian territory is not his to negotiate, but then telling reporters as recently as yesterday, or maybe the day before, I believe he repeated it yesterday, that there would have to be some land swapping in order to ensure peace, that Ukraine would have to give something up, that Russia might have to give something up, even though if you hear from Kremlin officials, they are reluctant to say that they would give anything up.
Look, this is a very good question, and it cuts to the heart of the whole matter. Trump has said for a long time that for there to be a peace, Ukraine needs to make concessions relating to territory. Russia needs to make concessions relating to Ukraine's security. Zelensky has made clear in his acceptance of several ceasefire proposals from Trump, he's willing to do that. Putin has rejected all of Trump's ceasefire proposals and has not given any indication of a willingness to compromise. I think that President Trump got so excited last week when there was the misreporting about the Witkoff-Putin meeting, and they thought that maybe the Russian position was changing. But it became clear as clarification was sought that Russia continues to reject all efforts at compromise and simply wants Trump to do Putin's bidding.
Kim, the other thing that was remarkable about this press conference that just took place with President Trump not too long ago was that he said there'd be severe consequences, right, if Putin doesn't essentially agree to end the war or get closer to that. Is that a statement that will intimidate Vladimir Putin in any way?
Well, remember, he just got off the phone with the Ukrainian and European leaders.
Right.
And
moments before.
Whoever is last in his ear tends to be who sets the message in the coming hours. In the Russian media, they're also downplaying what Putin might get out of the summit, saying the best he could likely get is a promise not to impose new sanctions. So at home in Moscow, they don't want new sanctions, and they fear it. But you see the Ukrainian president trying to get in his ear, saying, this is what Putin's probably going to tell you. And by the way, he's going to tell you he's winning at the front lines because of the recent reporting of what's going on in Pokrovsk. Ukrainian officials, Zelensky chief among them, have been at pains to explain a number of small units of Russian soldiers, 20 to 30, have punched through, but not strong enough to hold that territory. And he says that Ukrainian troops are one by one mopping up those units. That territory that they're trying to seize is sort of the high ground in part of the Donbass. It could lead to more territorial losses, so that's why Zelensky is pretty sensitive about it.
I'm curious, Kim, to get your thoughts on the setting for all of this. I mean, this was kind of put together pretty quickly, kind of at the last minute. They didn't really know where they were going to host this meeting. Now we're learning that it's likely to take place at a military base. What does it mean that Vladimir Putin is now going to be on U.S. soil in a military base? It's hard for me to say, military base.
Yeah. Hey, symbolically, it's a win. You know, it's getting invited back to U.S. territory proper and having a summit with the president, getting a chance to get in the room one-on-one, we're being told, to change his mind, to educate him on things that President Trump doesn't follow closely the history of Russia and Ukraine and when the Soviet Union fell, et cetera. It's also a symbol to Russians that, look, I can get this prestigious meeting. And last of all, a lot of Russian commentators are making a lot out of the fact that Alaska is territory that was bargained away by Russia to the U.S. in a negotiation, which is what they want Trump to do with Ukraine.
So many moving parts, and again, as I said earlier, the stakes keep rising as we barrel towards Friday. Thank you, Kim, so much. Kim Dozier and Ambassador John Herbst, appreciate both of your insight.